We all know the workplace can be difficult if you're neurodivergent. You're walking around those glass walls, trying to get in, hoping for an opportunity, and all too often being left out in the cold. You just end up burned out, underemployed, or not employed at all. It's a situation many of us have found ourselves in. So if working for somebody else isn't working, why don't we just work for ourselves, right? Let's get into it. One of the most recent studies about autism in the workplace, the Buckland Review, showed that there was only about 3 in 10 autistic people employed. That's 70% without employment. And we need to compare that. 5 in 10 of all disabled people and 8 in 10 of non-disabled people being employed. It's so low for autism. And we've gone into why in other videos, and I'm sure we will go into why again in future videos. So it's no surprise that many people think, do you know what? That's not working for me. Let's try to build my own business. Let's try to work for myself. Let's try to hustle around and make money elsewhere. What else are we meant to do? According to a 2021 study by the Centre for Entrepreneurs, approximately 40% of entrepreneurs defined themselves as being neurodivergent. In other studies, it goes as high as 72%. And I've got to tell you, as somebody who is an entrepreneur myself, has lots of peers in the entrepreneur sector, and I'm somebody who works as a mentor and coach and trainer to entrepreneurs, I see a lot of people who are already diagnosed with some kind of neurodivergence or that fit into some category of neurodivergence. At this point, that neurodivergence umbrella, I feel like we could almost stick entrepreneurs as one of those categories. You might even want to start putting it as one of the checkboxes in the DSM-5. Your history of mental health and burnout, yep, struggles in the workplace, does entrepreneurship. I'm being flippant, obviously, but it's definitely my experience that neurodivergent founders are prevalent. And as a society, we're certainly led to believe that starting your own business might be a good route if you are neurodivergent. Some of the most high-profile, most successful entrepreneurs, depending on how we measure that success, of course, have identified as being neurodivergent in one way or another. From what I've found, ADHD and dyslexia seem to be incredibly high in terms of high-profile entrepreneurs. But the richest guy in the world has said that he has Asperger's. Probably means autism spectrum disorder right now, but we probably don't need to talk too much about whether or not this guy has his vocabulary on point. We probably would start elsewhere if we were going to start unpacking some of the challenges we have with him. There really are some incredible high-profile neurodivergent entrepreneurs. It's not passing me by that these are all men in this picture, but we'll get onto that a little bit later on as well. Now, this is a subject I feel very, very well placed to speak on. I first started working for myself 15 years ago, and I haven't had a full-time job elsewhere ever since. Somehow, I have managed to just about scrape through, survive, pay my bills over that period of time. It's been touch and go at times as well, for sure. And money is definitely something that makes it quite challenging to do entrepreneurship, but I won't get too much into that right now. As an autistic entrepreneur, and I don't have an ADHD diagnosis, and as a woman, but perhaps just because of reality, I find that a lot of the narratives I hear about entrepreneurship and neurodivergence to not really be a very honest account. We're going to take the top 4 or 5, or we're going to take the top 10 richest people in the world, and we say we think probably like 4 of those are neurodivergent, higher than the general population's percentage. And then we're going to say, oh, because you're neurodivergent, why don't you just go and run your own business? Take on all that responsibility. Well, I've been there, done that. I've been a founder twice, and I've been in a C-suite role in a startup business. And in addition, I have coached hundreds of entrepreneurs, many of whom are neurodivergent entrepreneurs. Today is about digging into the realities of what that is. Now, before I go any further, I do need to say that This whole premise is kind of dumb as well, right? There is no such thing as a standard entrepreneur. There is also no such thing as a standard neurodivergent person. So how can we say, as a neurodivergent person, you'd be a great entrepreneur? There might be some traits in both of those populations that overlap. And there might be some aspects that make entrepreneurship a better fit than employment. But that's not to say that other businesses can just shrug us off and say, do you know what, you don't fit here, why don't you just go and start your own business? It's not as easy as that. The equation neurodivergent equals entrepreneur is not accurate. Yet, we are all pulled towards entrepreneurship. I was pulled towards entrepreneurship, I still am. What's that all about? And for me, the biggest driving force, unfortunately, was not actually a pull towards entrepreneurship. It was an escape from other types of work. If you feel unsafe, if you feel unseen, if you feel that you aren't able to put your skills into practice, if you feel like you're not developing or growing, and in fact, if you feel like the opposite, you feel like you are falling deeper and deeper into a spiral of burnout, of mental health challenges, of low energy, you see your life ticking you by as you are employed by somebody else, then the feeling of wanting to escape that and find a different route is a very normal feeling. The workplace can feel impossible. And with some of the rhetoric right now, it can also feel quite exploitative. The number of programs, the number of headlines I've seen that said, we're employing neurodivergent people because they bring this and the other, as though we're not individual humans with our own individual skills. I struggle with all of these stories that are being told. So, not only is entrepreneurship appealing to neurodivergent people, it can also align very well because as a neurodivergent person, you probably have a lot of strengths that you can apply to entrepreneurship, to building a business, to creating something new. So starting with the things that pull us towards entrepreneurship, those things that make it feel appealing, magnetic. First of all, the idea that you can create a culture for yourself, one that will work for you, one where your accommodations are met because you're the one who's getting to decide. This idea that you'll have more autonomy over your environment, over your schedule. For me, even being able to control those very physical aspects of the temperature of a room. If I'm wearing clothing that's uncomfortable, I can go and change it if I'm at home anyway. Maybe not if I built my own business and I'm in an office, which I have done before. The idea that you get to do the work that you really want to do, and you get to work towards missions that are really important for you. All of these things are just so appealing. We will go on to talk a little bit more about why each of those things are also kind of naive, because the reality isn't that you get to control everything, that you have autonomy over your schedule, that you can just be in an environment that is comfortable for you, that you only have to work with people when you want to and the people that feel comfortable to you. All of these things sound great, and the idea that you get to start to set the tone, of course, is appealing, but that's not always the way that it works out. But isn't it a beautiful illusion of entrepreneurship? The illusion of control. And of course, you have strengths that are going to be incredibly valuable in an entrepreneurial environment. Strengths that you can actually put to use instead of having them ignored by some corporate entity. The Birkbeck Center for Neurodivergence at Work did a study, and in this study they looked at the top 5 strengths of neurodivergent people, and those top 5 strengths were hyperfocus, creativity, innovative thinking, detail processing, and authenticity. Now, if I was going to write a list of the top things you need as an entrepreneur, those things would be pretty high on the list. So there is an overlap between those strengths that neurodivergent people have and the things that you need to get a business going. I should say in that study as well, I wanted to double check because quite often when people are talking about neurodivergence in this context, I feel like there's a lot of talk about ADHD, but there's not so much about autism. But actually, a large proportion of the people on this study did have autism as well. There was a balance, and women were also highly represented in this study. Other strengths that might draw you towards entrepreneurship are pattern recognition, systems building, and then it may be your special interests that also bring you into entrepreneurship. For me, because performing, being on camera, speaking, all of those things are part of special interests. Those are skills that are really important in the workplace as well. And then your specific business can focus around your special interests, potentially, if there's a market for that. And therefore, you can see that between the strengths and the appeal, you've got this amazing environment, this amazing, attractive way to work that could be awesome. And guess what? Like I said, I've been doing it for 15 years and I'm not going back into employment anytime soon. So I'm also attracted to this thing. I just don't want to sugarcoat the journey. And we have to remember that 2/3 of neurodivergent entrepreneurs said they went into entrepreneurship because they couldn't find employment. And unfortunately, this is not a great place to start when it comes to building a business. Entrepreneurship isn't this soft landing that some of us hope it will be. And I do need to do some myth busting around what makes entrepreneurship appealing and how your strengths may not mean that actually you are the best fit for entrepreneurship. So the idea that you have autonomy over your schedule in entrepreneurship. When you're building a business, you often have to work non-stop. Autonomy is not yours. The autonomy is in the hands of your potential customers. It's in the hands of your team, your investors, the other people that you are there to serve. Of course, there is no big boss, or rather you're the big boss who's getting to say where and when and how you carry things out. But if you don't get out there, be with your customers all the time, be with your investors, be with your team, be with your partners, build those relationships, then it's going to be very hard to get your business going. Now, I'm going to keep caveating all of this with depends on the type of business, it depends on who you are, it depends on the networks you've already got, so many different factors at play. But if you're running your own business, you have to be out there in the market, you have to respond to the market needs. It's not you that gets to set the tone, it's the market, it's your customers that gets to set the tone. When it comes to your environment, I've actually managed to work from home a lot, and I do think we do get to set the culture in our businesses, and you've got to be incredibly mindful of that right from the beginning when you start building a business. You have to be the type of leader that you would want to have, and I don't think anyone should be an entrepreneur if they don't have the leadership skills that are required. Now, those leadership skills, I'm not going to go into it today, those leadership skills may not be the ones that you're thinking of. It's not, again, the bravado, it's not the version of a leader that we see in the media. There are some very specific leadership skills that I think some neurodivergent people have, and I think some neurodivergent people don't have. And so you have to be able to have these skills in order to build the culture that you want to build. If you don't, then you're going to really struggle on the cultural side of it. So even if you're trying to create an environment that you want to create, you're going to be being pulled in 100 different directions, and you may find you're burnt out before you're able to build that business and that culture that you want to build. That's certainly happened to me more than once. Also, the idea that you're going to get to work specifically on the things that you're really great at. It's another thing that we need to call to account. Yes, you will get to do some of the things you're really good at, and you should definitely play to your strengths when you're running a business. But being a founder, being an entrepreneur requires different types of skills. It requires many different facets of the business to be looked after. And certainly in the early days, you're not necessarily going to have any money or any resources to bring in other people to help you with those things. Obviously down the road, or if you can start making money early on, then you will be able to bring in people to do the things that aren't your strengths, and you definitely should do that as you're growing a business. But that's not always going to be the case, especially early on. And I say early on often might mean the first 5-10 years. It takes a long time to build a business. So you've got to be able to persevere over a period of time. And I've always been involved with mission-driven startups, but mission-driven startups still need to make money. They still need to be commercially viable. It doesn't mean you have to do less of that. It means you have to do additional things. You have to focus on your impact as well as focusing on the commercial side of the business. And so again, there are a lot of things that need to be focused on, which I know at your very best you can definitely hold, but over time, one of the things I realized was I could see what all the right answers looked like when I was running my businesses, but I couldn't always make those things happen. Knowing the right answer, setting a strategy, doing amazing plans, getting other people excited, that's great, but you've got to consistently be able to deliver over time. And if the timing isn't right in the market, then even if everything else is great, your business is still going to fail. So it's still a massive risk. All that work you put in the early days without getting anything in return, still a very big risk. That's a risk you are taking. The energy you put in, the money you put in, your reputation, everything else. Those are all risks that are being taken. Now, I feel like I'm being really negative already, but I am going to continue to be a little bit negative for a bit longer. I'm sorry. I am a business coach and mentor, but part of my job is also about being realistic about what this journey involves. So let's have a look at some of the reasons why neurodivergent founders are really great, why other people love them, but why you have to be careful, and some things that you have to look out for. So, other people love that you can hyper-focus, that you can be really persistent, especially if you're working on something that's around your special interest. You're going to go and go, and you're going to keep pushing for years in many cases. But guess what? All those other people around you, all those people who love that about you, who love that you are going to keep putting in your time, your energy, your money for years and years and years, they're not the ones who then have to deal with the burnout, which is the flip side of that hyper-focusing over a long period of time. They're not the ones who are going to have to live through those meltdowns that you may have. They're not the ones who are going to have to dig themselves back out of debt again. Unfortunately, that's all on you. I'm not saying those things are necessarily going to happen, but you have to be aware that there is a risk that those things are going to happen. So you have to build your business in such a way that you make sure you aren't just head down, hyper-focus, persistent over many years without looking after yourself. Neurodivergent people are amazing at being creative, thinking out of the box, creative problem solving, looking at things in different ways. I mean, we can be incredibly innovative. We're not always known for being the best communicators unless we've worked really hard at it. Not all neurodivergent people. What that means is we can quite often be very misunderstood. And a lot of the work you have to do is to try and get yourself to be understood. Communication is a really important part of business, and you spend a lot of time, and this was always a frustration for me. I can see it, like I know what's going to work incredibly easily, but why doesn't everybody else just get it? That's what makes you great, and that's what makes it difficult. Partly because of the fact that we can't always operate well within normal settings or neurotypical environments. It means that we're good at taking risks. It's not always because we like to, or we want to, or we naturally take risks, but we kind of have to take risks because we don't fit. Life is just one big risk if you're a neurodivergent. And we're very good at operating outside of systems and settings and finding our own ways to operate. And again, this is really great for building a new business. But operating outside of a normal setting does mean that a lot of that financial risk is on your shoulders. And so you're taking risks, and we may well take risks because we're like, do you know what? I can't get work anyway. I can't survive in a corporate setting anyway. So I'm going to try something. I'm going to try running my own business. And I think that's awesome, by the way. You have to be aware of the financial insecurity that then leads to. And for me, this is kind of one of the biggest ways in which I haven't looked after myself over the years. Pretty good at paying my bills, and I haven't I have a mortgage or whatever. Also, I've had to sacrifice a lot of things. I mean, all entrepreneurs sacrifice a lot of things when they're starting out their business. I've done it over a very large number of years. I think a lot of people, especially neurodivergent people, this is often what it comes down to, because there is not a choice, and perhaps because we haven't necessarily gotten too well in other areas of employment, we don't necessarily have the financial safety net that many other people do. And that means that the financial side of it can be very tricky. I managed to get my mortgage in my first business. We got to a point in the first business where we were a company that had investment in it, and we'd grown to a certain size. I was able to take a steady salary over a period of many years, and therefore I was able to get a mortgage and have the amazing flat that I love. Ever since I left my first business, I haven't been able to get a mortgage. All I can do is remortgage with my same provider. Now, I know that that's already a really privileged position to be in. As an entrepreneur, often what you're doing is you're saving money to then have periods of time when you're not really taking much income, and then you're not always necessarily in the position to be able to save, or to be able to have a pension, or to be able to have other things that are going to be supporting you financially, to be able to invest, all of those kind of things. Of course, the goal of entrepreneurship is, let's get to that point where we can do that. But 9 out of 10 early stage companies fail. We love to believe, I definitely in my first business was like, there's no way. I am not failing this. I'm pushing. The reality is businesses do fail. And my first business, even though it was an acquisition, it didn't make me super rich. So everything that I'd put in those early years, I didn't get that back. All the burnout, all the health issues I got from it, didn't have things that then kind of that back. You take sick days, you don't take money out necessarily. Don't have support systems built in. There's no HR to help support you. So this is the kind of flip side on being able to set up something by yourself, being able to take those risks, being able to have your own environments. You don't have all those support structures around you. So unfortunately, being in a startup, you're still going to get many of the things that always challenge you in different working environments. There's still toxic cultures that you have to engage with. The neurotypical leadership norms, a lot of people still buy into that. The need for the charisma and the networking and all of this stuff is still a large part of startup life. Now, I think there's other ways to do it, and I'll talk about that more in future videos. But these things still very much prevail, and you can feel like you're going against the grain, but we're used to that, right? You do things differently. You're going to get those executive dysfunctioning days where your brain just doesn't switch on. You're going to have days where there's a lot of sensory overwhelm. If you're managing people, which if you've got to a certain size of business, I was managing when I was CEO in my first business, about 15 people, had a few people I was managing when I was CEO in my most recent business as well. So you have to give time to those people. You have to have those social interactions. You're not just getting that space to do what you want to do. You also have to deal with those ongoing rejections that you get from investors, from customers. And so you have to know whether or not that's something that you are comfortable with and that you've got the support system to help you with. One of my biggest regrets when I've run businesses, especially the first time around, was that I didn't protect myself at all. I so believed that this was the way forward. I loved being a startup founder, and I really believed in where we were going and believed that would be big, that it would be impactful, that I would never have to worry about money again. And what actually happened was challenges with co-founders, unexpected things that meant that the business wasn't going to, we couldn't push through certain barriers. We had to pivot, that we had to work in areas that weren't interesting to me. And because of the way I worked, the burnout was horrendous, and took me an incredibly long time to get through that burnout after I left the first business. When you're a business owner, it's not like you can just like up and leave. I had to go all the way through getting to the point of negotiating the acquisition deal, so finding people who wanted to buy the business, through what that would look like, all the administration around that, and dealing with everything in the business before I could completely step away from that. And That took nearly 2 years from when I'd made the decision that I'd already burnt out and I needed to leave. However, I still prefer working for myself than anybody else. I'm just choosing to build a different type of business this time than the ones I've built before. There are a few things that will help you thrive if you're a neurodivergent founder. I actually believe that these things, just like in so many things, that if we do best practice for neurodivergent people, then it's actually best practice for everybody. A few things that really help. They say that you need to build slowly. I think that, and I do believe in kind of premise of slow entrepreneurship, and I encourage that. However, there is a reality that in some cases you need to move very quickly in order to make things happen. But I think the mistake I made in my first business was because I was thinking this is going to be so massive, and you had projections that your business is going to be turning over hundreds of millions of pounds, and I would get to grow with that levels of investment we were getting and then talking about millions of pounds. And so this idea that it was all working towards this really big thing meant that as soon as we started raising money, we were sort of on this hamster wheel. And actually there are many other ways to build businesses. This particular business was a deep tech business, so you did need upfront investment in order to build the technology, and that does make it more challenging. And that's a lot of the businesses I work with are in that deep tech space. But there are many ways to build businesses, and we can do it in a way that's a bit more organic, that is steadier, that can serve your needs to some extent. At the end of the day, if you're a founder only thinking about your own needs and not thinking about the needs of the market, not thinking about the needs of the customers, not thinking about the needs of your business, then you're in trouble. That's not your job as a director of a business. Your job is to look after that business, that entity that is the business. Legally, you are responsible to do that. And unfortunately, saying, I was having a meltdown, or I was trying to protect my energy so I didn't have burnouts, is probably not going to stand up if you need to justify why you made certain decisions for your business. Having said that, there are definitely ways you can structure your time, structure your week in order to fit in with your patterns, but you do need to have some flexibility around that. When you've got particularly busy times, make sure you then plot in quieter times after that. Have asynchronous communication versus always being on the go. You get to choose whether you're remote or not, and you do have to think about that really carefully as you start to have employees. I always found a hybrid working system was the one that worked the best. Some degrees of flexibility, but some face-to-face time. That was pre-COVID. I would definitely still have that. In my last business, we were almost completely remote, but we did try to get face-to-face when we could. We were a more global team, so that was more difficult. Build in those quieter days, build in that deep work day, plot out what are the pieces of work that give you energy, what are the things that drain your energy. As soon as you get to the point that you can bring other people in to help you, then do that. There's plenty of ways you can do that flexibly in virtual assistants, for example. Of course, automating as much as you possibly can now can be incredibly helpful. However, you shouldn't automate too much and put too much time into building systems and processes until you have product market fit. So until you know that there is going to be take up by a market. The whole point of automation is to take on activities that you have to do over and over and over again. Until you know exactly who your customer is, exactly what they need, exactly what the service is, then building out those systems with any degree of rigor is not going to be a great use of time. Certain things that ended up being really important strengths for me were related to my autism, and I just didn't know it at the time. Things like kind of loyalty to the business, to the team, my adherence to my own principles, like I just couldn't do it any other way. When not masking, I'm very authentic. That probably sounds really contradictory. Everything in entrepreneurship is contradictory. I feel like everything in my life is contradictory. Use your strengths as a business advantage. That's gonna help you. And then you should also work with other people who already understand what it is to be a neurodivergent founder. You should definitely get mentors who understand that founder journey and who can talk to you about the things that might be challenging for you along the way. Every individual who's running a business is going to have so many challenges. It's just yours are going to look a bit different. And Again, yours are going to be different to mine. It's not like neurodivergent challenges are here, neurotypical challenges are here. Actually, we're all going to have our own personal challenges and our own personal strengths to bring into business. There are certain programs out there that support neurodivergent entrepreneurs. There's not an awful lot around at the moment. There's nothing I can signpost to immediately. You can go through kind of normal support systems, work with incubators or accelerators, and talk to them about how they support you with your specific needs. The nice thing about a lot of entrepreneurship training is it's very founder focused. So everybody who works in the entrepreneurship space, or anyone who really understands it, knows that it's not a one size fits all thing. And in fact, I did find a stat, I'll have to figure out where it came from now, but said 66% of neurodivergent founders said that their neurodivergence actually helped them in business, but they did say they also felt very unsupported. So be aware of that as you're working on your business. Now, I've been talking for quite a long time already, so I don't really want to spend too much time on this next topic, but I also do want to talk about gender and female entrepreneurs who are also neurodivergent, because there is an additional layer. This is where the intersectionality comes in, and I'm sure there's other intersectionalities that are at play as well. A lot of women are diagnosed later, and so that in itself can be challenging, because it might mean that you don't have as many self-management practices in place, or that you haven't been able to develop through your career as much because you haven't had those practices or that self-understanding in place. Women often pivot later in life. I'm definitely working with a lot of women who are in their 40s and their 50s now, who are starting businesses, and I find that really exciting. And it does mean that you've got more experience under your belt that might help you grow your business. But at the same time, it often means that you, like I said, haven't built up your career so much up to that point in time. Underdiagnosis isn't the only challenge. Anyone who has children or caring responsibilities often falls onto women, so that's going to be additional workload on top of building the business. And then you're also going to face the same gender bias that other women face in the entrepreneurial space. So still only about 2% of funding goes to women-led businesses. There's definitely issues still within the entrepreneurial system, and there are so many issues across early stage entrepreneurship. We haven't got time to dig into those even more today. I'm sure we will at some point. So here's my final reflections. I hope you enjoyed this. I know it's slightly different talking about entrepreneurship. It's certainly an area of interest for me, an area of experience and hopefully expertise. I realize I've probably been rabbiting on a little bit longer than normal because of that. I've got so many other things I want to dig into in this topic, so do let me know if you've got any other questions or comments, if entrepreneurship is something you've done, if it's something you've thought about, if you agree with things that I'm talking about. But my kind of final reflections are that the entrepreneurship is not a magic solution, but it can be a really powerful one if you make it work for you, and if you're aware of the potential challenges and you work to overcome them. It might not even be for your journey right now, but it might be something that you're working towards, or it could be something that's really powerful for you in the future. I would reflect on whether you're looking to escape or actually build towards something and create something. If you're starting from the point of escape, you're always going to be chasing your tail. Ask yourself, what support would you need in order to make it work? And do you have that support? Can you get that support? And are you hanging on to any myths? Are you like me in my early business when I thought we're just going to be massive and I'm just going to build for that and I'm going to ignore all of the other potential challenges and maybe not then be in the position to overcome those challenges? If you're neurodivergent and navigating work, power and purpose, this space is for you. Please do subscribe. It's going to help me continue to share my honest insights and hopefully bring more education into this space. It's not about the grind. It's about grounded, real power and allowing you to make the most of the skills and the passions that you have. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon.